Welcome everyone. So excited to be starting these Keylight lunchtime talks again for the sort of next few months. We've got some great presentations coming. I'm going to throw over to Kate for the acknowledgement, and we'll end up hearing a wonderful presentation from Lienors, one of our new members of Keylight. So over to you, Kate.
Thank you. I would like to begin by acknowledging and paying respect to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional owners of the unceded land on which I am speaking to you today. I would also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the various lands from which we're all joining in from. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging, as well as to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Melbourne and beyond. I will now pass over to Chris, who is going to introduce our guest speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Today we have the absolute pleasure of Lienors Torre, who specialises in animation and material design, exploring how objects might be manifest through animation in their various forms of existence and the identity persona they might convey. Her research also explores how objects exist and are experienced in new forms of media, and how they can inform and impel the languages of these media. These ideas extend into larger questions, investigating the human condition and how it exists within the digital realm and in artifacts. Lienors has also collaboratively pioneered research into the history of Australian animation, interviewing key directors, producers, and animators, as well as conducting archival research. She has co-written 2 monographs on this subject, Australian Animation and International History from 2018, which was the first comprehensive history on this subject, and Grendel, Animating Beowulf from this year, 2021. Thank you, Lienors.
So thank you for introducing me. I'm on Wurundjeri land today, and I'm going to start sharing my screen, and hopefully you'll start seeing a PowerPoint. And now I'm just going to start my play from start. Okay. So today I'm going to reflect on some of my work and draw associations between craft and screen. I'm not really going to talk about theory, and the works I show will either be my own or ones which I've collaborated on. And I'm not even going to show them in chronological order. And I'll also be showing some unfinished tests. So, crafting cinema, objectifying animation, screening objects, petrified motion, crafting through movement, glassimations. These are the sorts of titles I use to talk about my work, and they are all titles which juxtapose the screen-based virtual moving image with the tactile world of things which we inhabit. Crafting cinema is an interesting title. I almost feel uncomfortable using it as a title to describe what I do, as the word cinema comes from cinematography. It refers to the moving picture industry and the art of using, moving, and positioning the camera and camera lens, while considering what appears within and outside the shot, including light. In the context of traditional filmmaking, it seems to involve a lot of people, and it seems to be rather grand. But key to it is the glass lens, the light which is captured, and the image which is constructed. So the work you're looking at the moment is a work called Digital Light. It's a solid glass sculptural house, and there's a screen under it which displays an animation. And the animation is simply moving through the different rooms of a house. And eventually you go up the stairs, and it's a cycle, and you end up where you started from at the top of the stairs, and it keeps going. So I'll just I'll let it go for a little while, and then we'll go to the next work. But one of the interesting things, it took me ages to work out how to make the image clear in a glass prism like this. The base of the thing has to be at a slight angle. When it's absolutely flat and you put it on an image, it actually disguises and hides any image within it, and you can only see the image around it. And so glass optics are actually really interesting things to play with. So this will end up where we started. I might just continue on from this one. You can watch it more if you're interested at another time. So listening in is a second work which does similar things, but takes the idea further with 2 glass sculptures and a split screen where the 2 animations interact with each other. And it's called Listening In. You've got little ears on the glass houses because this work was made at a time where the world was extremely interested about digital televisions and how they could actually listen to what was happening in the private spaces of our houses. And so I tend in my work not to be, it's always a little bit playful. And again, it works as a cycle. So it ends up with the one table and starts from the beginning again. After I had made a few of these works, I found that I had issues with the digital image because a lot of the time it relies on technology to be shown, and the technology can be outdated quite easily. And so this work is called The Lost Room. It's another solid glass form, but rather than using screens and digital technology which age and become obsolete, I experimented with a hidden space that's revealed through the glass house and its bottom. And I also put mirrors around the outside of that bottom space so that it's an infinity space and it goes on forever. When I first made it, it was just a cast room with a few chairs, but then I experimented with some 3D printing and was able to get a lot more detail into it. In traditional drawn animation on paper, when you animate a line, it's very intimate. Animation paper is smaller than A3. You can even use A4 and Acme hole punch it yourself. You can draw images around the size of a matchbox, and the smallest scratches, when transferred to a projected image, are blown up to 100 times their size. Evoking the microscope, which visualizes the minuscule and unseen, you can suddenly see a small scratch which envelops your vision, and by means of its size has changed its presence in the world. This interchange between the idea of a craft in which one's fingerprint and body affect an object and that one can hold, to a projected image which is so large and enveloping that it becomes an environment able to affect one's body, is an interesting place to work within, and one which I will come back to in relation to VR. Glass is a medium which often sits on the verge of things. Windows, mirrors, screens. These are all objects which can often become invisible as we view through them and see mirage-like images that represent places we can fall into and believe. Even in the crudest animation, we make rules for the worlds we create so that they become believable, even though they may just be graphite on a piece of paper. And this is a collaborative work with other Deakin staff members. It was called Fountain of Youth. We were able to feed information from a website which counted the numbers of births and deaths in the world into our image as points of light, which congregated around the figure in the mirror. Using a Connect motion recognition system, the figure emulated the movements of the person in front of the mirror and was interactive. Gradually, the surface of the screen filled up with light until the image was lost in whiteness, because we have far more births than we do deaths. My early work in glass was often about form and light, about encapsulating things. They were always clear or translucent, reflecting the world around them while also capturing light with tactile surfaces. Material works have a presence and identity of their own in our world. I like how they are independent. This work, Leaf Light, is far outshining me at the moment. I recently signed release forms with a production company so that this sculpture, which is held in a private collection, can star alongside Nicole Kidman in 9 Perfect Strangers, an 8-episode Hulu series which is scheduled to air in August. I find it amusing that it has found an existence on the other side of the cinema screen in the traditional sense without me pushing it in that direction. Sometimes the works are about slight stories or thoughts with images that circle functional objects. Creating these is a process of slow grinding while you hold the glass form, often turning it. The images work around the object, which you can also look through. Working on them, they're a bit like zoetropes. And this cup experiments with the idea of zoetropes and thaumatropes. Craft has domestic connotations as it references the functional. When I started making glass, we were in a world where craft was shedding its past and working to be art. Now we've moved past that, and I actually find domestic functional objects quite interesting. This work, A Day in the Rain, I created 2 pieces of furniture that you would find in the same room and which complemented each other. They each contain glass sculptural screens which connect another space behind the screens together. And I used animated rain to show they were connected. There is an inversion happening in that spaces are flipped. You are in a house looking at furniture with house objects on them and rainy outside scenes animated within them. You look through a cupboard through a window at the rain outside. I also like that these are functional objects, but if you decide to fill them up with jackets and things, the screens become less visible and there's a sliding scale of functionality. Magpie calling similarly plays with the spaces in screens and functional furniture. Within the houses, you see 2 people eating soup. Once in a while, they pause. If you happen to open the drawer, you see an animated magpie calling at those moments when they are listening. Vivian screaming is a silent work. The house contains the very loud scream of a small child. In the real world, unfortunately, I'm still waiting for Vivian to stop screaming. She's now 12. Bird Flock uses augmented reality. It referenced the flight cycle of one bird, but also represented a flock of birds. Each glass was engraved, then photographed, and the resulting animation, which was triggered by the glass image, was the collection of engravings together. I was also playing with the idea of the glasses being a table setting which connected people and stories together. And going on from those, I made a whole load of other goblets with stories. These ones I never actually got to the AR stage, and I did have some issues with reflectivity in glass. So glass is also interesting, partly because it is a deceptive material and it is hard to focus on. Sometimes you'll hear about things like invisible cloaks, and they use glass technology and lenses to explore ideas like that, often to do with what is it, Army, Navy, those sorts of things. So again, playing with goblets, these ones are less functional because of course they have cast glasses or cast elements inside them. And then a while ago, Sean Redmond invited me to be part of one of his exhibitions, and I made 2 works for it. It was about diseases of the arts. Disease is something I don't normally tend to work with, but I found it really interesting in terms of eye disease and linking it to ideas to do with the internet. Because for both of these, there is patchy reception at times, and what people can and can't view isn't equal, I guess. So I made 2 works for that, a cabinet of ocular obscurities and then degenerative vision as well. In this work, there were 2 really large eyes that hung in the space and an animation that played behind them. So more recently, I've been working in collaboration with teams at Deakin in VR projects. VR is another form of cinema. This particular one is one that I've worked with Rose Woodcock, Sean Bangay, Amanda Douglas, and there's a whole load of other names that I should have put there, but it was getting a bit too long from the eye area. But what we've found interesting in this project, I mean, we're new to VR, so we're still exploring how things interact and work within it. And what you're seeing here is a space. It's essentially a game for small children who have amblyopia, which means in one eye, they have a lazy eye and they don't see properly with it, and they need to train to see with it properly. And so then we're making a game for them where they have to interact and deal with objects and play with it, because I think compliance is an issue. But what I found really interesting is in this project is the actual system goes in and it changes how we see this space. So when you go into a VR world, you're essentially hooking up both eyes independently to see a world that exists like we see it in the real world. And what we were able to do here, I mean, most of this you see as a complete space, but we played with the bee and only showed that in one eye. And it's dizzying and it's uncomfortable, but it's fascinating, because what it means is that you're able to construct an object in a space that you think and believe it exists in, and it seems to occupy a particular space, but you could essentially have a pear and an apple in that same space. And I find that idea quite fascinating, and I know Rose does too. And it's something we'd like to play with a little bit more in the future. So another project unfinished, and I feel bad about this one because I should have put more work into it a lot earlier, and I guess I'll continue with it because I am rather attached to it, is the idea of a curiosity cabinet. Curiosity cabinets are essentially early museums. And in this one, we're exploring the identity and materiality in a virtual curiosity cabinet and how it might educate and extend the location of public museum entities. Sometimes I think, oh, what are we doing here? This is all old hat. But then when I see Simeon's child interact with this object, I just feel renewed interest. And what I find interesting again here is that it's a crafted object that exists both materially and digitally. Oops, sorry. And I guess with that, I'll continue on here. So this is another work that I collaborated with Rose on. It's called Light Pool, and we used ball lenses to reflect light. So again, we're using a lens as a screen image because it's using the light and reflecting it up. And what I find interesting here is it actually reflects at the top and the bottom of the lens. And also when you have a point of view, you can see that the lenses, as they go back in space, the positioning of the object changes as well. But going on from that lens, I was then able to collaborate with Rose and Simon on another work called The Universe and I. And this is a ball lens where we've been able to look at imagery through it. And what you notice is when you look at the back of the lens, you can see the full imagery. And then as you slowly go around to the front of the lens, half of that image is lost. And this is a project that I'm now working with Cian, Victoria and Helen at Deakin with, and which we hope to make into a larger project called Peripheral Vision, Revisioning Australian Landscape, where we go back and start looking at Australian landscapes and water lilies and start seeing what we see or see the developments. Sorry, my computer's taken over from me, it keeps going forwards. But we see developments in terms of our representation of the landscape over time and how we might view that through this lens. So I think that's the end of my PowerPoint for now. Thanks.